Okay, hello. This is just a documentation of a poem, essentially. A little bit of context to it. Al Purdy, Canadian poet, died in 2001, born sometime long before then. I'm reading Sam Solecki's essay on him right now. Did I lose my bookmark? I hope not. I may have lost my place. Hope not. I think I remember where I was about. It's around chapter 5, I think. In any case, there's a poem of his that I couldn't find anywhere online, and I still can't, even when printing the whole thing in the search bar. So this is my form of documenting it and proving that I'm not insane, because I was trying to recall this poem recently, and I was going through his whole collection of poetry. I was going through his whole collection of poetry, and I couldn't find it. So, the poem is titled "On Canadian Identity, a Sentimental Monograph for the Daughters of the Empire." And a monograph, as we recall, as I Google it, is a detailed written study of a single specialized subject or an aspect of it. So, the reason why you can't find this poem in his beyond remembering, seemingly all encapsulating collection of poetry is because it has never been republished since appearing in Poems for All the Annets 1962, which I have a copy of, not the 62 version, which is why another reason I couldn't find it when I looked in that book. And so I'm going to read a short paragraph first from Solecki's book on Purdy, which I recommend if you're interested in him, but I doubt anybody is. So I'm going to read from this, page 39. Since I want my reading of Purdy's poetry in the next section to make the case for my view of him as the poet of the Canadian experience and his work as exemplifying a Canadian poetic, I end this section by looking briefly at a relatively unknown poem, which is an accurate statement, On Canadian Identity, 1962, in which we can hear anticipation of Purdy's mature poetic. It's not Major Purdy, but one can hear clearly in the decisive turn away from the derivative, though important, apprentice work of the previous decade, work in which the voice is that of a poetic ventriloquist. Let me make sure I was recording. Poetic ventriloquist, to paraphrase Eliot, which is T.S. Eliot. He did the poems in different voices. I think it's T.S. Eliot. It might be someone talking about Purdy, but I have no idea. Prior to 1961/22, 1961 to 1962, with a handful of exceptions, one has the impression of a poet uncertain not only about his voice, persona, and audience, but even about his subject matter. One also has the impression of a writer trying out styles and subjects and not often recognizing the lack of an organic connection between the two. Set against this body of work, On Canadian Identity resonates on the ear like the work of another writer. Since it has never been republished after appearing in Poems for All the Annets 1962, I quote it at some length. And here I'm going to read the poem and switch over to this. So you still have me if you want to look at me for some reason. And I have the poem which I typed out. Hopefully not too incorrectly. So, let me go through this now. On Canadian Identity, a sentimental monograph for the daughters of the Empire. I'm sorry if you hear those beeps. Hold on. Okay, I'm just gonna have to ignore that. Sorry. On Canadian Identity, a sentimental monograph for the daughters of the Empire. Names, if you like: Illecillewaet and Medicine Hat, Winnipeg's Prairie Sound, the whoop and holler of Calgary, Gun-a-noot's stammering outlawry, the small wooded province of Newfoundland. History, if you like: Verendrye-Moses, glimpsing something wonderful, mountains in the sky he thought were legendary, Riel's pitiful, insular Métis kingdom, the socialist rebellion of 37, Van Horne's railway hooting in the night, laconic, mongoloid loneliness. Macdonald too, Macdonald of course. Legends, oh, they're here all right, ready to shine from the screen, ready to shine from the TV screen for sweet profit's sake. Do you doubt it? I'll tell you songs to sing and words to take a bed that'll keep you warm as a wife with a sunburned back. Or, hell, I'll make these slovenly metrics sing in a genuine American imitation of the real thing. Bill Hickok, yet Wyatt Earp maybe. But all our heroes stayed dead. God rest their souls in the paradise of the great North Pole. The high school land, a dull people, a bridge between old land and new. But the critic judges by other achievements than functional existence, seeks to label, define, exhorts to be lifelike, ends puzzled. For we have bounced no rockets off the moon, swung west. Hold on, I'm going to redo this last line, just because there's more of a pause here. I'll do the paragraph, the stanza. The high school land and a dull people, a bridge between old land and new. But the critic judges by other achievements than functional existence, seeks to label, define, exhorts to be lifelike, ends puzzled. For we have bounced no rockets off the moon, swung west to loop the land with gold and steel, or made a bloody pageant of our greatness, or bought men's loyalty by giving it withholding. We have not... Is it giving it? Giving it or withholding. My error in typing. Or bought men's loyalty by giving it or withholding. We have not done any of these great things. Troubled, listening to other people's opinions, becoming them, pinned to the earth by them, as if we were a focus and burning glass for opinions. As if we were coming to birth somehow, learning to love and to earn and to spend, the worth of life being not necessarily noise. We kept unusual silence and then cried out one word, which has never yet been said. So that is that poem. And I'll read a little part after. And that's from page 47 to 48 of Poems for All the Annettes from the 62 edition. So I'll just go back to this can't see better. On Canadian Identity, this is from Solecki, 41, from his book. On Canadian Identity announces... Actually, I gotta check my pasta. Okay, my Puttanesca is really good. On Canadian identity announces directly and unmistakably an original voice, at once cocky, self-questioning, and critical, a stance rooted in a particular place, and a view of poetry as public speech, act by an anonymous first-person speaker concerned with our central issues. Later poems and essays will develop more memorably ideas latent in it. The idea that the poet names and maps the country, lifting an environment to expression, will become an almost topos, hummus, in Purdy's work, recurring several times in his 1993 autobiography, Reaching for the Beaufort Sea, pages 160, 238, 249. In his review of Literary History of Canada, essay 268, in his essay Disconnections, as well as many poems of the past 3 decades, a recent and particularly memorable version of it occurs in Home Country, the afterword to Paris Never Again, 1997, where Purdy remembers riding the freight trains across Canada in the 30s. And the country itself, this is Purdy, began to take shape in my mind, even if I wasn't entirely aware of this ongoing process. Under those conditions, it wasn't an abstraction either. Not just names on a map, but dirt under your fingernails. Places you've been and people you've known, and loved places that recreate what already is. Page 119. Here the names on a map in the land of itself, dirt under your fingernails, are absorbed as a prelude to their recreation in poetry. Typically, in discussing the point in a letter to Dennis Lee, 72 July 18th, Purdy both acknowledges having the sense of opening up the country, writing about places in a way that has not been done before, and judges himself guilty of a rank egotism for making the assertion. So that's that. And yeah, another point of this poem is, or another point to me showing you this is the line "pinned to the earth by them" is referenced in a Gord Downie song off of his 2010 Grand Bounce album, where the second line goes, "When we pinned ourselves to the earth." And he's referenced Purdy before much more obviously, so I would not be surprised. I'd be surprised to learn this isn't a reference to that, but he is deceased and no one seems to be interested except me in that. In that, finding that connection between him and Purdy. I'd really love someone to write a book about him. Anyways, that's the video.